Hello.
Hi.
How are you doing again?
Still pretty good. Yeah.
We've been talking, backstage, if you will. So, yay, I'm excited that we're doing this live. So,
Yeah, I'm like excited but nervous, but I feel like at this point in our required reading project, it just makes sense to do it in this format.
yeah. No, I agree. And it basically feels like how we've been doing it
Yeah.
before anyway.
Yeah,
So,
it'll just be easier on the backside with editing those long chat videos.
yes. All right. Well, let us jump right into it. I have a couple of like back end stuff real quickly that I wanted to remind us of. One is that this is part of our high school required reading challenge book discussions. This is book discussion number
5?
5.
I think 5.
I think that's what I put in the thumbnail at least. And yeah, we're having a live discussion. We're talking about the Grapes of Wrath, and we're talking about it podcast style. So, other than the cover of the book, which is the same cover that's in the thumbnail, there's really nothing visual that you have to see. So, if you want to just put this on in the background, you can go ahead and do that. The other thing that I'm excited about doing live is that there will be people in the chat who we can also talk with as we go. In fact, I see Sushi. Hello. Welcome. And I think the other thing that we're planning on doing is kind of going through the usual things that we discuss in these, and we'll discuss with each other. And then there'll be a time where we turn to the chat. So we don't want to, flash the chat discussion on the screen as we're talking, because I personally find that super distracting. So we will get to anybody who comments in the chat, but we'll do it after we have shared our comments, I guess, is what I'm trying to say. So, yeah. Okay, the Greats are wrapped. This was off of your list.
Yes, this was mine. So this is, and here I think we have the same edition, which made like breaking up our day's reading and like page numbers very easy. So that worked out. But this was off of my sophomore, so my 10th grade reading list. But in 10th grade, I wasn't the best student. Like I was definitely a Cliff's Notes, chapter summary, like fake it till you make it kind of reader, which is crazy because I've always been like a bookworm. I just didn't want to have to read for class. So I was only like vaguely familiar with like the basic premise of this book and its place in, I guess, American literature and like as a classic. But I, at this point in my life, was like, I need to revisit this because I have a feeling it's a book I will love. And so that's why it ended up on the list. Yeah, it was like I wanted to actually read the book I was supposed to read in high school.
Right, because what you're getting at is you didn't read it.
Right. Yeah. No. Yeah.
I love that. So so Grapes of Wrath, I guess some quick background, and then I'll share my high school experience too. Obviously written by John Steinbeck, or maybe not obviously if people aren't familiar with it. Published in 1939, and it was the winner of all the things. So he won the Nobel Prize himself for literature, and this was the book that came up most frequently in their citing why they were giving it to him. But the book itself also won the National Book Award as well as the Pulitzer Prize, which is still kind of a rare thing to do. And then, in terms of his intent in writing it, I found two really interesting quotes, both off of Wikipedia. So they have all the source information, and I have linked the Wikipedia page. One of them says, I want to put a tag on the greedy boys, shall we say, who are responsible for this, being the Great Depression and its effects. And then he also said, I've done my best to rip a reader's nerves to rags. So
Yeah, he certainly did.
yeah.
I think it's worth noting that this book comes after he was contracted by the San Francisco News in 1936 to write a series of essays documenting the migrant workers coming out of the Dust Bowl of the Midwest, and their experiences in California, and the treatment they were getting, the government support or lack thereof. And so he was going into camps and documenting things and really pushing for reform and assistance on a government level and not getting it. And then, a few years later, he writes the novel, which comes very strongly out of his experience researching the essays. Like, a lot from the essays finds its way into the novels. And so, yeah, I could see where like he wanted to really push readers emotionally, because now after the novel is where we see things start to happen.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, that's really interesting background. Yeah. Yeah. And I think that's going to come up for me later when we get to what we liked and didn't like and those kind of things and read-alikes. And while I answer, if you are in the comments, we'll get to you guys, or in the chat rather, we'll get to you guys in a second. But if those of you in the chat or who are watching want to share if this was a required reading for you for high school, or if not, if you've ever read the book before, or if you read it recently and what your expectations were going into the book. For me, I was not assigned this in any of my high school classes. I obviously had heard of John Steinbeck, but we read Of Mice and Men. That was like definitely required reading in one of my classes. And I'm trying to think if there was anything else by Steinbeck that we read. There may have been a class that did Grapes of Wrath, but I really don't think there was. I want to say I just recall hearing about the book as other things that he had written. Maybe it was on like a reading list or something like that. So I didn't know what to expect going into this book, other than I expected to like his writing style, because I recently reread Of Mice and Men, and it reminded me like just how clear and crisp and like accessible his writing is. And so I expected to have a repeat of that experience.
Yep. And you hosted that as a read along on, I think it was Discord. Something. So, yeah, I have recently, like maybe within the past 2 years, read East of Eden. And then I read Of Mice and Men when you hosted that. And I was like, yes, okay, I definitely need to give Grapes of Wrath like a go, like a fair shot, actually read it, because I also enjoy his writing style. I feel like it's straightforward and yet well crafted. Like he balances well that like not getting too carried away, but at the same time painting a full descriptive, layered, textural kind of picture.
Yeah. I feel like he does with description what Thomas Hardy does, but in a way that doesn't feel like too drawn out and like overdone to me personally. So I really like that. And let's say hello real quickly to everybody who's here. Hello, Doug. How are you? And Ryan was saying that she was a big bookworm in school, but assigned reading just wasn't for you. Okay,
Yeah.
so yep.
If there's something about being told you have to do something that makes me just like, absolutely, then I'm not doing it. I'm that kind of person.
Well, and especially in high school, like, right?
Yeah.
Like in high school, you're at that age where like everything in you, it wants autonomy. And then they're like, you have to do this. And more hellos. And assigned reading in American history as part of the Dust Bowl migration era. I think that's very common point to have it like inserted.
Right.
And Doug is amazed how many high schoolers read this. The Red Pony is his only book that seems kind of youth oriented. I haven't read that one. Have you?
Now that you mention it, it feels like something maybe my dad read to us as we were kids, but I don't really remember. Because that's another situation, much like assigned reading, where like if my dad loved something and like pushed us, like my dad's favorite author is Ernest Hemingway. I'm like, well, then I'm not reading Ernest Hemingway. Although recently I did read The Old Man and the Sea and I was like, oh crap, I really liked it.
You're like, ah, darn,
Yeah.
Dad's right, maybe. Yeah, and we'll come back to this idea, Doug, because that's always something that we talk about is whether or not we think it's appropriate for high school, specifically in terms of if it's suitable for discussion and if it's something that high schoolers could understand and grasp. But then we usually also talk about whether content-wise it seems appropriate for that age.
Mhm.
So we will come back to that. Natalie also read Of Mice and Men in high school and knows some other people had to read Grapes of Wrath. And you read The Pearl on your own but didn't like it. I think The Pearl was another one. Yeah.
Yeah, The Pearl was harsh. I listened to that one once because it's a short one. So like I had to like clean up my basement. I popped that on and like I was like, ooh, this is intense.
I remember nothing about The Pearl. Like I know I read it somewhere in the high school range, and I don't recall liking it, but no idea why.
Yeah, I need to revisit and pay more attention. I think we could get into why that one might have missed later in the discussion.
Okay, interesting.
I have a suspicion. Yeah.
Okay. And then Doug thinks your dad is cool, Alex.
I'm getting there. Yeah. Lately, I've definitely been sharing books back and forth with him. Like after we read James, I got him a copy of James and he loved it. I have to check in with him if he's finished Invisible Man because he's been enjoying that. And let's see, I gave him The Things They Carried. So like we're definitely now like at a point where we're sharing things back and forth, but he's still trying to get me to read like the Westerns he loved. And I'm like,
Yeah, that would be a hard sell for me too.
Yeah, he's a big what's that the big Western actor? The Duke, but what's his actual name? That I should know. I don't know.
No idea.
Sorry.
Totally
oh my gosh.
outside my
It was like on the tip of my tongue until I opened my mouth. But this is like my dad's hero, and I'm like, yeah, no, John Wayne.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, like that's my dad's favorite actor, and I'm like, absolutely not. Like, I will not be watching his movies or reading the books. Yeah. Yes, sushi, I got there. Thank you. And the reason I got there is because I had to remind myself of the title of there's a book called Jesus and John Wayne, and I read that one.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Gotcha. And then Doug is suggesting that you and your dad try Erasure together at some point.
Yeah, so he's seen the movie American Fiction and he liked that. And so we did have that conversation of like book versus movie. So
nice. All right, well, let's hop into our favorites, least favorites, what worked or didn't work for us. And again, we'll discuss together. And then if you guys in the comments want to share, I'm going to keep calling it comments. But I mean, if you're watching this recording and you want to share in the comments, we'll reply to that too. But we'll get to you guys in the chat as well. So do you want to start? What were the things that you liked about the book or you thought worked really well?
So I guess I'll lead into that with like the basic synopsis of the book, which it kind of alluded to in discussing how Steinbeck was contracted to write these news articles following the experience of migrant workers escaping the Dust Bowl and going to California to find work. So this is like the American epic. It is following the Joad family, who were tenant farmers in Oklahoma. And because of the, like, I guess, new economic structures and the new farming styles and kind of industrialization of, big agriculture, I guess. They've now lost their farm and they need to travel to find work in California. And so this book is following them while also kind of in an alternating chapter format, giving you like this big picture of what's going on, you know, in society. So we get like big picture and then we get family. And that is actually my favorite thing about the book. I like how it's able to kind of like use the close story of this one family to like latch onto my emotions and then pull back and have me thinking a little more cerebrally about like what are the issues at hand. So that's my favorite thing about how John Steinbeck structured and like what he accomplished with this book.
Ooh, okay, that's a good one. I didn't think about this structure when I was like sitting down and thinking about what I liked about it, but that was definitely a highlight for me. I, in general, find that I can really enjoy that structure in a book in terms of just going back and forth between really focusing heavily on the themes and the meanings behind everything, and then looking at, you know, sort of like, and here's, you know, kind of going back and forth between telling and showing is almost what it's like. I think for me, though, I ended up writing down in the end that the themes and the meaning were my favorite part of the book, but I think it comes from the structure and the way it's set up. I just really enjoyed the way he drew out, like, this is how things are working and this is how it's hurting people on every single level, including specifically this family. And so it didn't just leave it as a, you know, social conflict story or a let's talk about workers' rights or labor rights or that kind of thing. It was also like, let's talk about how this impacts the everyday American family. And let me, you know, help you get to know one. And I really just loved the discussion of all of those things, you know, from how the, you know, tenant farming worked and how that was only slightly a step up from sharecropping, how, you know, industrialization was impacting the nation both on a like worker level as well as there was a lot of talk about how it was impacting like just the environment. You know, literally the soil, how it was impacting the plants and the animals. I wasn't expecting that, and I thought that was really interesting that he brought that into the discussion. What else? I don't know. There were just so many things that he was able to tackle, and I do think that a huge part of it was because of the way he structured the novel, for sure.
Yeah. Like, so for example, I think what, like the third or fourth chapter, we're following a turtle crossing, or like trying to get across a road. And you're reading it, it's very short, but you're like, why turtle? Like what the, but you're able to eventually, like as it goes along, realize he's using this turtle to make a statement about you know, how life is being interrupted by this industrialization. It's almost like a also like a man versus nature kind of thing. And then in the next chapter, we're looking at the family, and the turtle even gets hit by a truck going down the road. And then in the next chapter, we have the family losing their land because of this new style of farming, and a tractor literally drives into their house. And so you could see like, so now this is where the turtle story is very obviously an allegory for the farmers and their situation and them being uprooted and disturbed in their way of life. And so, yeah, it gets back to like John Steinbeck did a really good blend of like creative writing in like a really metaphorical kind of way while keeping it pretty straightforward and like, oh yeah, I get it.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean his writing style, like that's something that I think I always enjoy about John Steinbeck, especially as I'm going back and rereading it. I feel like that's something that I can just now rely on. Like
Yeah.
I'm going to like the way he structures his books. I'm going to like his diction and syntax. I'm going to like the way he plots his stories. Like um I mean, because even getting to the plot, like I really enjoyed the way this story was plotted and how it was, for the most part, a linear story, but you did have a feeling of going back and forth because of those like alternating chapters almost. And even the pacing of his stories is really good. Like I think there was one part earlier on in the book where there was like a chapter where we were like, okay,
Yeah.
okay, like what's going on?
Which,
But then
like,
it,
at the end, even that makes sense because it was them getting ready for getting on the road. And so
right,
there is like this buildup where I think we were in the same position as the family. We're like, all right, let's just go already. Then let's go.
yeah,
If that's
yeah,
what's going to happen, let's do it.
yeah, yeah. So it's not something that you want to like fault the book for, but it's something that like as you're going through it, you
Yeah.
notice. Yeah, yeah. And then real quick, just want to say hi to G who joined. Hello,
Hello.
welcome. And yeah, so I mean, there were I definitely had more things that I liked about this book than that I disliked. I think another thing that I already kind of mentioned that I really enjoyed was just the description of things, like the way he describes like the landscape, the way he describes, you know, the sky. At the very beginning he opens with a chapter, pretty much a chapter long description of a dust storm coming into town and how that is impacting the community and their response to it and that kind of thing. And like that opening chapter brought me right back into The Return of the Native by Thomas Hardy. And Thomas Hardy opens that book with a scene where it's like an entire chapter and pages of pages where he's describing the heat. And I think we had talked about this where I was like, oh, these things are similar, but with Thomas Hardy, I didn't like it as much. And I wasn't sure if it was because like the heath is not something that we really have here in the
Mhm.
US. And so if it was just harder for me to picture that, or was it that he wasn't a good enough author to help me picture that if I hadn't seen it? And you know, I could say the same thing with John Steinbeck. Like, I think he's brilliant at this, but then I also know what he's talking about. Like, I've seen it. So, but either way, like, I really enjoy anytime he turns and looks at something, you know.
Yeah. And we mentioned it came up in Of Mice and Men. And again, as we discussed this book, as we read it, there's something about the way he sets a scene where like I feel like I'm watching a stage production. Like
Mm,
the way he sets up a scene, or there's even some moments where like a character's moving through a scene where like it's so descriptive and so like I there's almost like stage instruction without it there actually being stage instruction like to a scene. So yeah,
yeah,
I love how he can really put you there in his story.
yeah. Like, I'm thinking of there's like I was gonna say a scene. That's
Mhm. Yeah.
a chapter where there, you know, he basically puts you at a used car
Mhm.
salesman lot. And like that was definitely one where I was like, oh yeah, this would be such an easy like stage adaptation
Yeah.
because you get that sense of like you know, lots of people moving around and you know, you hear the different people saying their lines and shouting across one another. And yeah, it's such an interesting way of writing a moment. And he's so good at the dialogue and the interplay of the dialogue and the narration. So yeah, I'm yeah, I think just his writing and his thematic messages throughout the book are like such strong suits for him.
Yeah. Not to say he's a perfect author. So
No.
do you have a least favorite thing to talk about?
I do. And Doug was saying that he liked the connection of Thomas Hardy to
Mhm.
Steinbeck. Yeah, I think I again, not to get ahead of ourselves, but I think if you like the one, definitely try the other, especially if that's the part that you
That's good
like.
to know because I have not read any Hardy. I've been like almost intimidated, and I have to say, like, up until reading East of Eden, I think like 2 summers ago, I was also intimidated by Steinbeck. So
Mm,
I'm pleasantly surprised at how accessible his writing style is.
yeah,
So you
yeah.
guys have me hopeful. I think I could tackle Hardy.
Ooh, yeah. And I have a recommendation for
So
that
yeah,
when we come to
give me
that
the
part.
titles. Where do I start?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. We will get to that. But you were asking about
Least
okay,
favorite.
least favorites. Okay. So I think I had two. And I think for both of them, they fall to me under things that I just felt like I didn't see the point of them in the work per se. Um, so the first one I think I can talk about in brief in the second because it's just mentioned a few times, and that was the use of the N word. Um, it comes up maybe 5, 6 times in the book. So it's not something that is used a lot or repeatedly. And to me, that almost made it more problematic in some ways because we kept discussing like every time it came up, and every time it came up, it like even the context that it came up in was like, what was the point of that story? Like,
Yeah.
um,
And I think even having previous experience with Steinbeck, I know I was like holding out hope that like he's gonna fix this. He's gonna address this in a way that makes it maybe purposeful, like if it has to be there at all.
right, right. Because in other works, like I'm thinking of Mice and Men, I don't even know that they use the N word in Of Mice and Men. I don't recall, but there's definitely negative characterization
Mm-hmm.
of the African American guy who's in the book, and the characters there seem to be acting racist towards him. And so I remember in that short book, like initially being really turned off by it. But then, like you said, he does something with that
Mm-hmm.
characterization, and he does something with that character, and he does something with the other character's reaction to that person. And as you move through the book, it takes on meaning, and you start to understand his message and what he's trying to say through all of this. And I thought that worked really well. But it is tough because you do have to make it through all those really uncomfortable moments. Whereas in this book, like literally, even if you took the N word out, I would have felt like, why are we having why are we having this
Right.
conversation? Because it would just be like, oh, you want to hear this like funny little song that I know? And in the song, it would use the N word, and then there was no point to the song
Yeah.
or the use of the word. And so, yeah, so that was definitely something that I don't like. I mean, for multiple reasons. Like, it's a derogatory term, it was derogatory then. There was no meaning or message with it in the book. It was maybe a tad bit of characterization for the people, but if it wasn't anything that truly developed anyone's character well. And then I also think it just limits your audience. I mean, I think it's just more revealing of the author and who his audience is, and who he's expecting to be the readers of his book more than anything. Even
Mm-hmm.
though there is a moment in the book where he references how similar and wrong what's happening to the people of Oklahoma and the people who are being pushed out by industrialization. He compares how bad their situation is, and he brings up what's happening in the South with African Americans. So there is like a moment where you can tell that Steinbeck as the author is trying to get his audience to have some sympathy and recognize some connection there. But then I think as a modern day reader, you also have these like content that you just can't explain and just doesn't make any sense. So that was one for me. And then the other one I know we also shared, which had to do with the sexual content in the book.
Yeah, just like too much. And again, like didn't really add to anything, just random sexual references. My working theory is that he was just trying to engage or like make himself relatable to a reader, keep the focus, like capture someone's attention and keep them, you know, relating to his characters.
Yeah.
Because it was just like him being like, I'm going to lay down some like heavy material, but with like lowbrow humor. So like, so that you can be part of this conversation.
Right, because that's how it came up. It wasn't like there were scenes where people were engaging in activity. It was always in the context of like, we're having a conversation, but it's going to be a random body conversation, or we're going to constantly talk with this one character about how he's tomcatting around. But we're not just going to say that, like we're going to keep talking about it. And it was just weird at best.
Yeah, and I think maybe because the story is so like family focused, like we don't really go outside of the family when these conversations are happening. And like, so you have like the main character or one of the main characters, Tom, observing his sister who he hasn't seen in years, but like really aware of like this sexual nature of like how she's developing and she's pregnant, and like he's discussing her like pregnancy glow in a almost erotic kind of way that makes it awkward because our focus is how this family is viewing each other. And then he's got the younger brother who's out tomcatting. And so, but like you get the fathers like, oh, what are you going to do? Isn't it so funny that he goes out and, you know, lays all these girls?
Yeah, there's
and then
like
he's dragging himself home in the morning. Yeah.
Yeah. And it was one of those things where I'm like, maybe this is something that's like outdated about the book, right? Where when it was written in 1939, where this would have been more humorous, or like I definitely felt like there was some sort of historical connection lost in translation, or at least hope so, because otherwise I was like, how did this ever work well in the book? Because it always left you like awkward, like, you know, like I'm starting to get icky feelings, like why are we going on about this, why is this still being talked about? And because it was just always presented in a weird way and overdone. And there was even one point where I was like, he's using this as characterization of these people. But then it became like to such an extent that I was like, this is almost becoming like a stereotype, and like not a positive stereotype, where it's almost like it was starting to portray the family and people like them as sort of, well, all lower class people are super body and, you know, talk about, you know, different things and make jokes and talk about spreading themselves around like all the time. And so it just got to the point where I was just like, okay, if you're using this to characterize this type of people, what are you really revealing that you think about these people? And so I think that was the other reason that I was like,
right, because then when you're putting these characters in a situation like where they find themselves where they're dehumanized by other people, like that's just more fuel for that type of treatment.
Right. Like, oh, see, we don't want these people part of our community because this is all they think about, talk about, act about. Like it just was a very negative portrayal, the way it came across, the way it kept coming up. And G was saying that she had the same exact two issues regarding the use of the N word and then sort of the ongoing random And I think in both cases, it felt like random conversations that the characters were having that was supposed to be characterizing them, but the meaning behind it wasn't always clear and, may have fell on being stereotypical or negative or whatever. So what about you? What were the things that you didn't like?
So I think very similar to what your dislikes were, because it kind of comes down to in his focus on these Midwestern farmers and like their plight, like he's really trying to get us emotionally invested in their struggle. And in doing so, he's willing to erase or just brush over and like barely acknowledge anyone else. For example, he's focused on the treatment of these migrant workers. And even in his original essays that he was writing for the San Francisco News, he keeps writing about how like previously California used foreign migrant workers and were able to pay them barely anything, treat them terrible. But now that they've all been deported, because this is like a post-World War I situation where foreigners are being deported en masse. It all comes back around, I guess. And now the workforce for these farms to exploit are white people from the Midwest. And so they're not going to get away with treating them the same way. And so he's almost like saying like, based on the fact that they're white Midwesterners. But he even lists like the countries that they're originally from. And it kind of gives this air of like, but they're from the right places. And so that's why they deserve better treatment. And then what's funny is, so I ended up ordering a book, which even the title of this book does have a slur in it. So I'll just call it The Harvest Nomads. And in the introduction to that, they point out like, Steinbeck is really making this case that like California farm owners are not going to get away with treating these migrant workers the same way. Actually, the migrant workers did not advocate for themselves in the way that Mexican and Filipino workers ended up being the ones to really inspire change. And so I think he kind of missed the boat. Like I wanted more discussion. I wanted them to get to California and have like more of a mixing pot interaction kind of thing. But ultimately, I have to step back and say, that's what I want as a modern reader. If this book was written in 2025, I 100% expect that conversation to happen. But a book coming out of 1939, like,
right,
that was his focus. Like he told the story he wanted to tell.
Right. And the story he wanted to tell was about, the displacement of people specifically from Oklahoma, because he also didn't get into the displacement of people from anywhere else in the US.
Right.
And then also their experience of coming to California, which does, for a variety of different reasons, ignore other people's experiences. Yeah.
And then even in describing in a very like emotionally evocative kind of way, them losing their land in Oklahoma, he acknowledges that they took this land from Native people, but in a way that's like, and that's why they deserve it more, because they fought for this land. And so like, there's kind of like a disconnect, because then they get to California and he's villainizing the farmers, the big farmers and landowners in California for taking that land from Mexicans. So there was kind of like, maybe a little lack of reflection of like, it was okay for them to do it, but these guys are the bad guys. Like they did the exact same thing, but they're the bad guys.
Yeah. Yeah. Because I mean, at one point, one of the characters is even like, because one of the characters that comes in later in the book is half Native American. And even that character, he has say, oh, well, I kind of wish I was full-blooded because then I'd be able to live on a reservation and at least then I'd have my own land and I'd be,
Mhm.
and basically I'd be lucky,
Yeah.
and it's like, okay, like that's one way of looking at
Yeah,
that
yeah, you'd be lucky
situation.
with that. Yeah, okay.
So yeah, no, I definitely hear you there. So and we've had a few comments come
Mhm.
in. Doug was saying that he feels like the problem with being a genius and winning a Nobel is you're held to Olympian standards, and a lesser author would get a pass for being a man of his time.
And
In
that's
this,
something I try to be conscious of. Like, as I'm reading it and finding problems, like I said, like, I would expect a certain conversation to be had if this book was being written today. Yeah.
yeah,
You adjust my
yeah. I mean,
standards.
I do think it's something where I don't know that he would get a pass for being a man of his time, but I do think it's a book that you would have to read. Like, you can't do a death of the author with Grapes of Wrath. You're
Mhm.
going to miss too much of what the author's intent is, which I read at the beginning. Like, he is trying to um, hold people responsible for what happened in the Great Depression and its effects and get readers to respond to what's happening in California to people from Oklahoma specifically. So you do have to read it in its historical context. So you could historically look at it and I think it's worth looking at what were John Steinbeck's views on these different groups of people, and I think, from what I've read, there's enough information from other works on John Steinbeck. Like, I'm not going to sit here and say I think he was a racist, but I'm not going to say he was particularly progressive in
Mhm.
his views on other people either. What we can say with the Grapes of Wrath is we have to look at it and say, what did he do well with this, and what didn't he do well with the material that he gave us? And I think in both cases you can still say, it's totally fair to say, he didn't, if you're going to use a derogatory word in your book and you feel like it's necessary to do so, I didn't think he did it well. It served no purpose. It wasn't, it didn't help you get to know those characters better in any way whatsoever. And I think it's, the same thing that you're saying. You don't think that he handled the conversations where he did bring up these other groups in any sort of meaningful way, and I thought the same thing. I felt like there were too many times where it's like he brought it up, but I needed him to either talk about it more or why bring it up, because it just kind of became a very quick passing thing to be like, I'm aware of this, but we're not going to talk about it.
Right. I think that's what makes its exclusion from the story more obvious and got me thinking about it more, is because he's so close. He's like right there.
Right,
Yeah.
yeah. And like you said, he did make contradictory statements about it as well, where it's like, here it's okay, but here it's wrong. And it's
Mhm.
like, well, okay, if you're going to think that and you're going to include that in your book, at least help us understand why,
Right.
So yeah. Um, G was saying she read it during the floods. Oh yeah, that would be
Yeah.
a gut punch if you read it during the flooding. And Doug gets into more of why, because a giant tree in the floodwaters at the end of the book. Yep, that would uh,
Mhm.
that would make it harsh. And Doug found it harsh that the idea that Steinbeck's not great for anybody but Wasp. I don't think either of us were saying that. I think certainly what I'm saying is that from parts of his writing, it's very clear that that's who his intended audience is, whether he was aware of that or not. Like,
Right. He may not intend to be writing for specifically this one group of people, but maybe his weakness is that he kind of misses the mark there. So one thing I learned again from this, which this is the collection of the 7 essays that he wrote. So the subtitle is On the Road to the Grapes of Wrath. In the introduction, we kind of get this background of him struggling to be a writer, actually not having any success, having to rely on family for financial support. And then finally in 1935, he writes A Tortilla Flat. And that's his first really success as a writer.
Mm-hmm.
That ends up getting actually kind of some flack for having negative Latino stereotypes.
Mm-hmm.
So
again, you've got
going
to
back to the Pearl too, I think maybe that's just why maybe that one doesn't sit as highly in your regard as like other stories of his. And I'm not saying he's doing anything intentionally harmful. I'm just saying like it's maybe not the strongest tool in his toolbox is writing about another type of experience.
Right. Because there's your intended audience, and then there's the actual like reach of your book, and it definitely seems like we're both saying we think there's things he did in the book that have limited his reach in terms of audience that this book is going to appeal to. And especially today, like if he's trying to get really work on the heart of the reader, you don't also want to simultaneously offend certain categories of readers. So there are things that he does that are limited. And Doug did agree when you were talking about the disconnect between, what the landowners in Oklahoma versus California. He did agree with that. And hello, I'm not going to be able to say that your first name without help. Agni Dipto? Recently finished reading this book, feeling sad for Rosharn at the end of this story. Rosharn at the end. So I want to know more about that. What was it that made you feel sad for her at the end? I mean, there's lots of reasons, but if you'd like to share specifically your reason, how did you feel about Rosharn at the end, Alex?
I was kind of surprised, first of all, in the whole direction of the very end of the book, because I guess that's another, maybe one of my least favorite parts is we lose track of one of the main characters of the book. Tom Joad is the son who's returning to the family. We get kind of that, is it the prodigal son sort of feeling from him, like he's been away in prison for 4 years. He's returning to the family just in time to go on this journey and go through the struggles with them. At the end of the book, he takes off and he's gone. And while that makes sense for his character, it kind of left me hanging where like I wanted to be with him and go on this newfound political journey with him and, see the movements he starts taking part in. But instead, we stick to the family, and now we have Rosa Sharn, who's kind of been a little vapid up till this point, end the book in a very important place where she's been pregnant this whole time, which the timeline of her pregnancy was a little weird, but she delivers her baby. It is not living. And then she helps someone who is starving in the only way she can, which is to nurse a starving man. Like, I don't know if we went into this discussion with we do spoilers here, but
I did mention at the beginning, I think. If not, sorry.
We have in the past, and this is the fifth book, so.
we do spoilers. This is not a spoiler-free conversation.
Yeah, and so she went from like this very childish character, very naive character the whole time, to at the end having like this almost like biblical mother role to her, like where she ends up, and like this moment where she's like, she knows what has to be done. So it was a very moving scene, but at the same time, kind of a weird way to end the book.
Yeah, I had very mixed, like, I almost feel like I need to separate them out because I feel like I had the same issues you did with the end of the book, where it's like, wait, are even though sort of the protagonist of the book in some ways is the whole family, like
Right.
if you had to choose one person, it was definitely the eldest son, Tom. And then at the end of the book, like you said, he
Not the
just,
eldest son, remember. There is another
oh,
brother.
yes.
Briefly.
Right, that's right. Noah. That's right. I forgot.
Forgettable.
Yeah, Noah got written out of the story. And then I was shocked that Tom got written out of the story as early as he did. Like, I
Right.
wasn't surprised he got written out of the story, but I did have a moment when he when they said goodbye to him, when the mother said goodbye to him, I, like you, thought for sure he was going to come back into the story,
Yeah.
because there were still like 100 pages at least left of the book. And I was like, well, there's no way you just like wrote him out of the story. And he did. And then Rosharn became more and more of a prominent character. And I also am not sure that I truly liked how that went, but I did like what that did to her character. Like,
Mhm.
I liked her final character development. And, because we did see her whole time through her very oddly paced pregnancy, um, her develop as a person and change over time. And I almost feel like she had a better character arc than Tom did,
Yeah.
which is also kind of odd. Um, but then that ending scene where, she has that final moment where she is the final person who is the person who has nothing but is still willing to give whatever she has, and it's literally food from her own body. Like, mind blown. Loved it.
Yeah. And well, I think throughout the book, as we were checking in with each other at the end of the day or the morning of the next day, we were both very moved by the mother of the story, like her role, or like the women's roles in general throughout the book. I feel like John Steinbeck wrote a lot of respect for women and like maybe like their quiet, like backseat kind of driving the family.
Mm-hmm.
And so I feel like with the end of the book and Rosa Sharon's situation at the end of the book, he kind of passed that on to her as well. So I kind of appreciate that kind of full circle treatment.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I agree. Like, I think, we loved from beginning to end everything that he did with the mother. And I think he does a really good job with his female characters, keeping them historically accurate to whatever gender role they may have had, but also pointing that out.
Yeah, he called out the gender roles at the same time.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. Let's see. Silky is not a Steinbeck fan, and I think that's totally fair. Yeah, and but love the discussion. Oh, thanks. And hellos are going around. G agrees with Silky. Oh, thank you, guys. And yeah, and so it was the loss of the child that
Yeah, which
really
is
hit
very
home.
sad, but also felt like the right thing to do in terms of plotting. Like it made sense.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, he's definitely writing in the American realism category.
Yeah. And again, like even that situation comes out of families that he was witnessing as he was traveling from camp to camp to write his articles. So I think I've only read 4 out of the 7 articles that are collected. And in one of them, he focuses on 3 different types of family. One who have a tent, they're newly arrived in this Hooverville camp. Another one who have like kind of like a paper cardboard structure. And then another family who is like, in that paper structure, they're the middle class of the Hooverville. And then he's got the family that's literally living in the dirt. They have like kind of like a lean-to stick shelter. And he writes about how the mother loses a baby. The last baby only lived a little while, and the baby before that only, and like, so like he's seen all this. And so a lot of like the really hard things that the family goes through in this fictional novel completely real. Like they're very much experiences that he saw firsthand. And so I like that he kind of kept his fiction so authentic in that way, like and which goes to his point and his purpose in writing this is to like hold that mirror up to society and be like, this is the ugly truth.
Right. Yeah. I mean, you have to have elements of realism in there if you want people to respond and potentially act on the travesties that you're portraying. Doug was saying an author going from the flippancy of Tortilla Flat and Cannery Row to the overarching meaning of life of East of Eden and the grapes is amazing. Imagine Meg Schaefer writing War and Peace. So I don't know I'm not familiar with Meg Schaefer. But
yeah, I don't know Meg Schaefer either, but actually I have Cannery Row kind of lined up as like something to pick up like soonish. And I did notice that it's described as a satire. And I love satire, but that's not what I expect out of Steinbeck, just because my reading experience has been East of Eden, Grapes of Wrath, and Mice of Men. They're very serious.
Yeah, interesting. Yeah, I could see, though, him getting into satire, because I'm thinking, again, the used car salesman.
Yeah.
Like that whole scene, very satirized. Like he had a lot of moments in there where he was like, okay, I'm going to give it to you and I'm going to show you like just.
Yeah. So I mean, I'm looking forward I'm hoping it's like a Sinclair Lewis maybe kind of tone.
Yeah.
That worked for me.
I could see that for sure. There's similar time periods too.
Yeah.
And then I'm going to call you Agni, if that's okay, but you can let me know if better pronunciation. Was saying that also the end of the story where the whole family went to a house where a small child was there with his sick father. Yeah. I mean, if he didn't get you in the feels during the book, he was hammering in the nail into the coffin. Yeah. Like what? Why is that phrase not coming out right? But you know what I'm saying. He nailed it in at the end for sure. Yeah. And Noah dipped and didn't look back. That is right. That is so right. Noah was like,
we had a conversation like, what happened there? And like, did Steinbeck realize he had too many characters and like he wasn't himself keeping track, or like? Yeah, because I found it funny that like previous to that, the family's car has broken down on the highway, and Tom suggests at this point they're traveling with another family, so there's two cars, and Tom suggests we split up, and the mom was like, absolutely not, this family is not breaking up. They get to a campground, they swim in the river. Noah's like, you know what, I'm gonna follow the river down, and when they tell mom, she's like, all right, well, we gotta pack up.
Right. We were like,
keep it moving.
Wow. Like haters gonna hate. And I mean, even Noah's like, we all know they don't really like me. And I'm like, truth. Like, yeah. And there were a couple of moments where we talked about that, where I was like, like you said, did John Steinbeck give himself too many characters? Because at first there is this sense where it's like they all have to stay together and we meet a whole bunch of family members and we keep adding people on to the number that are traveling with them. And then even the characters are in the book have times where they're like, hey, Casey, you haven't talked in a while. What have you been doing the last 7 days? Because we haven't heard from you.
Right. And the uncle also like, well, you haven't had an opinion. What do you think we should do? And it's like almost like Steinbeck's like, oh yeah, I got to bring them in and make their absence like reasonable.
Right. Like, oh, I forgot you were there. What do you have to say, character? I mean, Noah.
Yeah. You know what, Noah? Why don't you just go? This car is too heavy.
Right. From the beginning of the book to the end of the book, it's like, no, we can't just leave them. They have to come with us. Well, Noah.
So the other night I watched the movie, and there's a scene, in the beginning when John comes back to the farm and finds he finds his family gone, and then he goes to his uncle's house, and there's like a group celebration, hugs all around, and I'm like, oh, that must be Noah. he's gone in the rest of the movie. And then, but he's credited at the end. I was like, wait, where did Noah go? Like, I don't even remember.
The director forgot about
I don't even remember the scene of him leaving. He just wasn't there anymore.
Oh, but that reminds me of like the modern day version of David Copperfield, where like, because there's one character in David Copperfield that you kind of feel like, wait, what's going on with this character? Because like it just doesn't make sense.
Mhm.
Like the character just doesn't make sense, and you come to like the character, but like initially when they're introduced, you're like, what's going on here? And in the movie, not in the book, in the movie of the most modern version, the director literally writes her out of the movie. And like she acknowledges in the movie, because it's kind of a tongue-in-cheek version of it. She kind of acknowledges in the movie that she never really belonged here and is like just writes herself out.
Yeah. Well, yeah, so that's I almost expected at the movie. I was like, oh, they got rid of Noah. And then I see him in the credits. As I was like, it makes sense. Like, he doesn't need to be there in the movie. But then I see his name in the credit. I'm like, oh, yeah, I did see an extra person in, like, the family hug at the beginning.
Right. Apparently, even the director felt like, well, I can't not put him in, but he's not really in it.
Yeah.
Doug was saying the final Rose of Sharon, scene is the culmination of the I to we theme of the whole novel. Casey's sermon, a little piece of the great soul. And then he also went on to say, just to finish it, knowing cutting out and mom holding them together is back to the we over I theme. Yeah, it is interesting how they kind of go back and forth.
Yeah, there was a lot of emphasis on like together we have strength.
Mm-hmm.
Together we can, rise out of the situation. And I love that theme. Yeah. And what he was doing with that for sure.
Yeah. And then, hello, Mad World. Just hopped on. Have you heard of Sonora Bab? I have not. Specifically, whose names are unknown. Stunning story. She wasn't published because it would have competed with Steinbeck's book.
Oh, that's very interesting.
We're both like
writing that down.
That is really fascinating. And I'm assuming competed in terms of writing about the same topic. Mad World loved Steinbeck and the Grapes of Wrath, one of your favorites, but people gotta read Sonora Bab's book. We'll definitely be looking up that.
Thank you.
Yeah. And then Doug was saying hi. So do you have anything else on the favorites versus unfavorites? Anybody else in the comment have anything that they liked or didn't like about the book that we haven't talked about? So that's all that's jumping out of my head. I did tab my book, and I don't know how well it's going to show up with my lighting, but the green are the things that I didn't like. And I can say that 90% of them, maybe even 99% of them, are either have to do with the one of the two things I mentioned. Oh, and animal death. There was a lot of animal death. So,
there was.
But it had meaning.
Yeah, even that kind of becomes purposeful as opposed to some of the language he uses.
Yeah. As harsh as it is, like it's something that I would say is like a content warning. If you don't like it, like it's going to come up multiple times, but there is a meaning. It is symbolic of stuff that is going on in the book.
Yeah. So then one thing I would say is that when we get into our discussion and we talk about a least favorite, it almost sounds like we're dragging the book and like getting really negative. I feel like that's just, if we have to pick something, like these are things that I do feel like weren't the strongest parts of the book.
Mm-hmm.
In the end, and you'll see when we get into ratings, I guess more how it balances out. Like there are more positives, I think, that John Steinbeck did with this than negative. We just happen to be discussing the negative right now.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I mean, I think we discussed a lot
Yeah.
of the positives in the book as well, but I think that is a good point to point out that it's like I would mention as a content warning that there's, animal death and you could argue even cruelty in this book that comes up, but it's not something that I would be like, well, I would have given it a 5, but instead I gave it a 2.
Right.
Like, it's not that kind of thing. It's just one of those, like, here's things to know and mention or that I didn't like or were awkward. And I think this is a really good point that Doug makes, which is strength together is the whole idea of union movements. And I think that is definitely the direction and messaging that John Steinbeck gets, is this idea that, I mean, there are unions who, their slogans are together we can, that kind of thing. And it's, and that gets talked about in the book, how as an individual, you're not going to be able to do any of these things. You're not even going to be able to find a job, let alone get paid the right, enough on your own. Like, all of this needs to be a group effort, done together, working together, that kind of thing.
Right. And so again, that's where at the end of the book, when Tom dips out to specifically go take a more active role in strikes and forming unions and getting people to come together, that we don't get to follow that. Yeah, I felt like I was cheated out of something there, because that's what this whole time has been building up to, I feel like. And then, but instead we don't get to follow him on that path.
Yeah. Yeah, I would have liked the closure of, before the final chapter with Rose Sharn and the family in the barn. I would have liked one of those alternate chapters, at least, that goes back to talking about universally what's happening to everyone, and like one last glimpse of like the labor movement and the labor movement leader, so that we could have pictured it as being Tom, even if it wasn't specifically Tom.
Yeah.
Like, I feel like, if I had written this book instead of John Steinbeck, like, it would have been trash. So
yeah, I definitely could not. I could say all the things he should have done, but I can't do them. I can't do any of them.
Right. So, but if we could create a wish list, like, that would be on my list. The world's best soliloquy, I'll be there, of Tom Joad, or The Gardener of Fahrenheit 451.
I loved that I'll be there. I loved that scene of him saying goodbye to his mother.
Maybe unfair because we're both mothers. I don't know, but it was really good. And I haven't read Fahrenheit 451 since high school, so I can't give an opinion one way or the other. And Mad World's voting for Tom Joad.
Yep.
So, and Doug says good choice. Was that a trick question, Doug?
It was a layup.
Yeah. All right. Well, shall we share our ratings, our letter grades? So if you are watching for the first time, because it's a part of our high school required reading challenge, we do have a report card where we are giving, just an opinion letter grade, A through F. F, I finally reminded myself, is only for books that we end up DNFing. And so we give each book a letter grade as well as a number grade. So the basic, however many stars out of 5. So, yay. You ready? 1, 2, 3.
I gave it an A, and it is a 5-star for me, which I went back and forth on how many stars, actually. I knew it was an A.
Yeah.
Do I see yours is 4.5?
Yeah. So I agree. The A was the easy part. The A is like a 90 through 100 on a report card. And I too struggled with a 4.5 or a 5-star. And I ended up going personally with the 4.5 because this was the book that just made me go, like, I don't know that I can ever completely give an author a pass on the N-word. Because this is a book that I feel like turns, like, the use of it would turn a lot of people off of this book, sheerly because of the fact that, like, there's just no reason for it, and I don't know that I would say that there's ever a reason for it, but I think there's periods in time where it's less charged in writing. And so I think there are historical times where it would be less problematic for people as readers at that time, even though it's always problematic, if that makes sense. But I think this is not one of those books. I think this is a book that, like, every time you come across it, you're just, not everyone. Clearly, there'll be some people who are fine with it. But for me, I think it's one that every time I come across it in the book, it's just going to be a, why is this here?
Yeah, we had that conversation where, like, even if he came back and made it make sense, it doesn't undo the harm of coming across it on the page and having to read it in the first place.
Right. And so I think both of those,
understand that. Yeah.
Yeah. And so I think for both of those, I'm like, okay, like, I don't need it to be a perfect book to be a 5, but I did want my star rating to somehow reflect the 2 issues that I had. And so I felt like that half a point was kind of going to communicate that to me when I look back at it, that I'm going to go, oh, this was a really good book, and I'd potentially recommend it to people, but there's something in it that I need to remember to mention.
Yeah.
That was.
So on Storygraph, I am obnoxious and do the quarter stars. So, like, I would probably put this as a 4.75. In terms of our report card and, like, our grades, that's where I'm like, it feels more 5 than 4.5 for me, because I had to make myself focus on the fact that my problems are from being a reader in 2025, like a reader now. There are things I would want him not to include or to include. So instead I had to put my, like, all right, like, it's not going to be a perfect book in terms of those expectations. And so if I take that expectation out, I felt better giving it a 5 than a 4.5.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's totally legit, because I think we all have things that are, like, preferences in books versus like, and subjectively, which that wasn't done well, versus things that are a bit more objective or might not necessarily be, personal taste. Like, I think writing style can often come down to, like, personal taste, but then if, like, there's editing errors in a book, like, that's like, okay, like, there are words spelled wrong. Like, no one's arguing that, that's different than, like, this is too floral for me. So, and I think we both have, it sounds like, a bit of that in our grading, but this does interestingly make it only the second book off our list that has gotten an A.
Oh, that is.
Do you know what the other book is?
Oh, The Things They Carried.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because I gave an A to Clockwork Orange, but you did not.
That was personal preference. That book gutted me. I was like, oh.
Which I think you're getting me back with the next book.
Yes, the next book. We'll hold out on that for a second, but let's go to the comments real quick, and then we can get into our read-alikes and recommendations, and then we'll talk about our next book. So Silky makes a good point. We're not all going to love the same books, and that's what makes it fun and creates an authentic exchange of ideas. Absolutely.
Or even love them for the same reasons.
Yeah, for sure. Sorry to drone on about the whose names are unknown, says Mad World. No, you're fine. But Bab was of that area and time, and her characters are more real and not as stereotyped. Oh, well, thank you this is a good resource. I have never heard of the author or the book, I don't think. So definitely interested in it. Others complain that Steinbeck's characters are too flat, but you think that's what makes the transformation of Rose Sharon that much greater. Yeah. And I actually didn't find her a flat character. I thought she was very complex. But she, like, her arc was definitely at the tail end of the book.
And I think there were plenty of characters that Yeah, we're definitely very well developed where like you can read behind, read between the lines, see what's going on like almost behind the scenes and like understand where they're coming from or like how one's reacting to the other. And so the characters did feel for the most part very rich and full and like there was definitely a depth to them.
Yeah.
But
I can see how you
then
could.
there were Noahs like and Connie.
Yeah. And I mean, I could see, and I mean, you have to, like, you can't have like 3,000 primary characters that have, are complex and dynamic. Like, that, not everybody can be Leo Tolstoy. Most people are going to, have your primary characters, your secondary characters, and your tertiary. And as you get further down that food chain, the more flat and static they're going to become. I mean,
Right.
a lot of people like a villain that is flat and static and just pure evil. If nothing else, it makes the book fun if done right. But I could see the argument that maybe with Steinbeck's characters that they're not all particularly dynamic because he does have so many characters. Like a lot of them are complex and like who they are is well developed, but not all of them change over the course of the book. And some of them have smaller changes. Some of them change earlier in the book. Like I feel like the mother, we get revealed who she truly is much earlier on in the book. And she changes like her ideas slightly over the course of the book. Whereas and like Tom, I think is another one who you could argue doesn't really change over the course of the book per se, but he is a very complex character for sure. So yeah.
And Casey has quite the arc, and yet most of it is like off page.
Yeah, right.
Or like from the back of the truck, silently.
Right. The memories of Casey live on, even though Casey himself is rarely talking. I mean, Casey gets talked about more than he ever talks, even though when he does talk, he has really at the beginning of the book a pretty long introductory scene.
Right. When he does come in, he preaches, even though he is not a preacher anymore. And he will let you know, he will remind you.
Yep. Mad World can see what Doug's saying though about that. There's always a lot to pick apart. There is. That's the best part about talking about books. There's always so much to talk about. How does Steinbeck's writing compare in East of Eden? You didn't read Grapes of Wrath because you wanted to hear our thoughts just based on the reading of The Pearl. Okay. Natalie was saying that East of Eden is the one you've been hearing lots about. Same.
Yeah, I feel like there was several group reads of it recently.
Yeah. Douglas saying East of Eden is a lot different, in some ways better, and the work of an older Steinbeck with different priorities. Yeah, definitely very different plot and themes and messages in that one.
I feel like the characters are almost a little bit flatter in East of Eden in some ways because East of Eden is a more direct retelling of the Cain and Abel stories. And so in that way, you have to fit the characters into this dynamic of good brother, bad brother.
Yeah,
but even
that
in
makes sense.
Like there is like some nuance and like motivations that I liked it a lot. And similar to Grapes of Wrath, the setting, the landscape writing, it was just so rich. All three books I've read, Eden, Mice and Men, Grapes of Wrath, they open with this landscape description that like that's now officially what I expect anytime I crack a Steinbeck. Like
yeah, same. And that's just from Grapes of Wrath and of Mice and Men. And just and in all fairness, I've also read the opening of East of Eden. So I noticed that in there
right,
as
and
well.
so that was a temporary DNF for you? Or a DNF?
No. That was temporary. Like I think I picked it up and it was still winter. And I had just gotten over like reading books where like families were just arguing and being mean. And I realized that wasn't something that I really enjoyed. And then that happened to be the next book on my TBR, and I was like, I'm not ready for more of that.
Yeah.
Especially knowing the story of Cain and Abel, I was like, there's going to be no family love in this. So it's more of a soft DNF that I need to pick up at the right time.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah. And then Doug was saying Tom Joad ignored the rules of stupid and kept paying the price for it.
Yeah, which I respected. I love, he's out on parole. He's already breaking the rules of his parole by leaving Oklahoma. And his mother the whole time is like, begging him to just like keep it cool and don't get in trouble. Don't break the law. And he's like, if the law makes sense, I won't break it. But like, these things aren't the law. And like, so I really appreciated him like focusing on right and wrong versus legal or not.
Right. Which isn't like a let's go out and do the illegal things, but it's a very subtle commentary in some ways on the legal parole and prison system in the US, a lot of problems of which are exactly the same today as they were in 1939, which is sad. Really, really sad. So yeah. East of Eden is much more allegorical, biblical, heady, but Grapes of Wrath is down to earth. That is Matt Pearl's
a fair
opinion.
assessment, yeah.
And I feel like that's what I've heard. Doug loved both, but in East of Eden, Steinbeck almost tries too hard to stick to Genesis. And that kind of sounds like what you were saying about the characterization, is that because he's trying so hard to stick to that story, his characterization potentially suffers for it.
He definitely still creates very interesting characters, but they have a role to play.
Right.
So like
there's a plot. Yeah. So, all right. Well, we have our rating on the book. So for books that you feel like it reads like, or book recommendations, what do you have, if any?
One that came up in our discussion was Kristin Hannah's book, The Four Winds, which is the only Kristin Hannah I have read or really even care to read. But when I read that one, that's the one that was like, all right, I need to go back, like, because I'm loving this story and this journey she's on. And I know enough of what Grapes of Wrath is about to know that this is basically a version of the Grapes of Wrath told for moms. Although now I think the Grapes of Wrath is the Grapes of Wrath told for moms too, because the mom was my favorite character.
Yeah.
So yeah, The Four Winds, I think, is a very similar story. Just a more modern style of writing it.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. We talked about The Four Winds a lot. I definitely think if you like contemporary historical fiction and you're intimidated by John Steinbeck, but you want to read about this time period, I think The Four Winds is a great introduction. And I do think there's something about the way that book is written that kind of piques your interest and makes you want to keep going. Because I had the same exact feeling where after reading that, I was like, I want to read The Grapes of Wrath. So I think those are really good books. They touch on it in slightly different ways. The families are starting in different places. In The Four Winds, you have a female protagonist who is going to California. You have a different family situation with her. So I think you also get a different perspective, which I think is really handy. I talked about Thomas Hardy a lot in this. And so I would say if you like John Steinbeck and you like his imagery and the way he talks about landscape and the surrounding environment and the way he describes that, I would definitely give Thomas Hardy a try. I think he goes even more into it. And while I can never picture the heats with Thomas Hardy, I'm still like, what are you talking about? It's still beautiful to read. And But I did have one friend that said reading Thomas Hardy is kind of like having someone describe a painting to you. So there can be pros and cons in that. But it feels like I feel like I could paint by number by just like listening to the audiobook of what Thomas Hardy says. It's detailed. And I would say if you're not familiar with the English heath, though, I would look up a picture of that. I personally find that helpful. And the book specifically of his that I would recommend is The Woodlanders. That's my favorite Thomas Hardy. And he does the same thing as Steinbeck. He opens pretty much all of his books with descriptions of the landscape. And The Woodlanders is of a wooded area. And most people have been in the woods. So I personally found that way easier and accessible. But I feel like the opening of his books that he's most well known for and reminds me most of John Steinbeck's openings are The Return of the Native. And that's the one where the entire first chapter basically is a guy like walking across the heath, and you get bugs and plants and every color in the sunset. It may be too much. And then the other book that I have that I feel like both reads alike and I would recommend is actually Stalingrad by Vasily Grossman. And for that one, because you have two similarities with the authors, which are they were both journalists.
Yes.
And they were both on the front lines of the topics they were writing about. So John Steinbeck, journalist, front line of what was going on in California. Vasily Grossman, frontline war journalist in World War II. And I think out of both of them, you get really good dialogue and really unique characterizations because of that.
Yeah.
So
there was another read alike, I guess, but this is actually a children's book. I don't think it's middle grade. I think it's more like still like kind of upper elementary, and that's Esperanza Rising by Pam Munoz Ryan. And this follows a girl, young girl from Mexico. And in Mexico, her family is landowners with, servants, and they're of a higher class, and then they end up losing everything and losing their land and having to go up to California to pick grapes. And so now we have that, what was this experience like for Mexican migrants? And I do think this takes place later. So we get also the story of strikes and the organizing, and then some of the legal changes that came out of like the Mexican workers coming together and demanding change. So that's that little bit of the experience that like I was kind of missing from Steinbeck's or acknowledgement. Granted, I think it is a little bit of a different span of years. So
I love that. Like you just have like a huge, great California migration project and read The Four Winds, The Grapes of Wrath, Esperanza Rising.
Yeah, let's do
it. Come at it from every angle.
Yeah. And then I do recommend this one, The Harvesters, On the Road to the Grapes of Wrath. The introduction by Charles Wollenberg was great. And this is actually put out by Heyday Press, which is a independent nonprofit publisher out of Berkeley, California. There's a lot of typos and more like spacing issues, and like, there won't be a space between some words. So like, there's just those little things, but it's giving me a lot of context for the Grapes of Wrath and Steinbeck. So I'm really enjoying going through this now as like supplemental material.
Okay. And then the final two things. So one is I realized we totally skipped talking about high school appropriateness.
Oh, yeah.
So we can go back to that real quickly, and then we'll real quickly talk about what our final or what our next book rather is, and then we'll be done. But real quickly, you're very welcome, Doug, for the discussion. Same to you, Mad World. Thanks for joining us. Silky's interested in potentially reading Four Winds as well, and Nothing Else from Kristin Hannah. I feel you there.
Yeah,
it was the book that made me go, okay, that was really good. I don't want to read anymore, because I felt emotionally manipulated, which is funny because John Steinbeck is very much like, I want to emotionally manipulate you.
Yeah, I remember you using that, like emotionally manipulated, and I'm like, okay, fair. And then I go, wait, that's what Grapes of Wrath is doing. He did it for a cause. Like he wanted to emotionally manipulate the readers of the time to make change.
Yeah. Which I think is different than feeling like, I feel like you're just trying to make me cry.
Which I did. In the Four Winds.
I ugly cried in the Four Winds. So, absolutely. I mean, like sobbing, like, and of course, you know, in that moment, my husband comes into the room and he's like, oh my gosh, what happened? And I was like, how do I be
5-star book?
Yeah. And I did give that book 5 stars. Same. So it is a good read. Be warned. And Doug was saying goodbye to everybody. Bye, Doug. Thanks for joining us. Same to Mad World and Silky and Stalingrad Connection. Doug agrees. He's read it. So, okay. So to backtrack real quickly to the high school appropriateness, where do we think this would fit into a high school curriculum? And regarding high schoolers, like, do we feel like this is appropriate for high school in terms of them being able to grasp the themes and message and be able to discuss it in a high school setting?
I think if high schoolers, teenagers are willing to read, then it's accessible. I think it's easy and straightforward enough writing. Like he wrote it to reach as many people as simply as possible. However, I feel like just that initial pushback, like I had in high school, and from what I've heard from other people's experience, you just don't want to read what you're told. And so I think it's not the biggest of books, but for an assigned reading, it's a chunky book. So maybe doing something like reading the journals and or the essays he wrote as like a study of journalistic style writing. You're getting the same stories. And, you know, maybe that's a way to introduce his writing instead. Because I do think maybe it's included in curriculums. Typically I see around 10th grade, because I think that's where it lines up with what American history class is doing. Mm-hmm. And so it kind of, you know, you work history and literature or English classes together. You probably get more interaction out of students at like a 12th grade level. Mm-hmm. More social awareness, or like even caring that, like, you know, things are happening out there. I think just mentally, developmentally, that's a later concern.
Yeah. I think I totally agree with you in terms of lining it up with American history. I think it's a brilliant idea. I think I agree that there are like reasons that it would be harder for a high school crowd, even more so today than in the past. I know at least in my son's public school, they were frequently, I think, to get over this, like, you told me to do it, now I don't want to do it. They were almost always given a choice of 3 or 4 books. Yeah. So I think this would serve really well as part of that rotation. Like if you had, you know, you were studying American history, you had, you know, 1 quarter or whatever, where you were going to be coming across the Great Depression, the Dust Bowl, all that kind of thing. I could see this being an option on the reading list. I agree with everything that you said about like the accessibility of the book and the themes and the stuff to talk about. I think would be very accessible to high school students. And I could see if it was put on a reading list as an option, I could see some high school students picking it up, particularly, you know, your students who like to read, who aren't discouraged by a longer book because, I mean, it is a long book in terms of high school, given the pacing that you tend to read books at in high school. A 500-page novel, could potentially be a whole semester or two in high school. So that might be tricky to figure out. And yeah, so I think it's possible. I think it would be a good choice. And then you just have to figure out what to do with the content that gets like awkward in the story. But as far as high school appropriateness, we usually drop is the content appropriate for high school level? Because that's always a whole nother discussion.
Right. We don't want to get into the issue of censorship. We want to discuss like engagement and like critical thought. And like,
and how would you get it onto the curriculum in a way that makes sense? Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. And I think as a choice, potentially with the 4 Winds as also an option up in there.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. I'd rather see Esperanza writing.
Yeah.
Okay. And I think that is it for this discussion.
Yeah.
Our next book is the one that you're like,
oh, yeah, this is my payback for making you read Clockwork Orange.
2 totally different books, though.
Yeah. And so, like the first part of Ragtime, I think I owe you.
Yeah, but I've ended up liking most of our books. So our next book that we discuss is going to be Great Expectations. I am actually have it as the book club read for my members book club. And Alex will be hopefully joining us.
Yeah.
For our book discussion of that. And we will be doing a live show somehow. We still have to figure that out because we might end up doing the live show as the book club book discussion. Mm-hmm. We're going to talk, and then I'll talk with my members and we'll figure all that out. But that is the next book that we are reading. So we will be talking about that in November. Is that? Oh my gosh. Yeah. November.
Wow, already. That's crazy. Remember how we wanted to read all 10 books off our high school list by the end of the year?
Yeah, we were super ambitious, but we've made really good progress.
We have.
Yeah, and in all fairness, Buddy read other books in between.
Yeah.
And off the
list. And I think we've kept a pace that makes this enjoyable and not a chore. Like, this is still something I very much look forward to. We didn't put that pressure that like we have to read at this schedule.
Yeah. So we will be doing Great Expectations next, which will be great. No pun intended.
And watch, I love this book. I'm just so intimidated by it, and I have not read much Dickens or like had any desire to, but
Yeah, just keep in mind, and I say this to everybody, and Katie from Books and Things says the same thing. Do not take it seriously. Like, Dickens is fun. He has an amazing sense of humor. If you're not expecting everything he say to be like deep and like, he gets deep, but he's going to surprise you when he makes a like social commentary. But the vast majority of the time, he is having fun with his characters, with his characterization, and everything. So it'll be good. I'll be sure to try and post, at least in my shorts, when we start reading it. Alex and I typically, when we buddy read 50 pages a day. Mm-hmm. So that will be exciting, and I will be putting up on the Storygraph read along when we start that book for people who want to discuss on there. So I'm excited. I'm excited even just to see what you think.
I'm excited and like nervous, but yeah, overall looking forward to it. Obviously, we have a great time discussing things together, and then I like this. I like this live chat. I think this worked out.
yeah, I loved the live chat. I loved having you guys here in the chat. In Dubious Battle, a shorter, easier version of Grapes, specifically about labor organizing. Okay, definitely looking that up as well. Thank you, Doug. But yeah, it's been so fun doing this live. I love the idea that like neither of us has to edit this when we're done. Though I probably will like edit it and do like a little short for us. Though, guys, I've showed this to Alex before. Like StreamYard now has it where you can have AI create a short for you. They're so bad. They're so bad that they're funny. Like it is like the titles that they give for the shorts are so dramatic. And then like they highlight the words that you're saying, but like there's no context to it. So you're like, maybe I'll post some privately to like the channel members so that they can just share in the nonsense that AI creates. Silky says our current education would not allow Grapes of Wrath as allowed reading.
Really?
I could see that. I could see it definitely getting banned from some public school reading list. Yeah, just because, I mean, Ethan Frome got banned because they touch hands, and that's a symbol of them being intimate.
I also need to remind myself that high school was over 20 years ago for me. So like, where I'm like,
you read A Clockwork Orange.
Yes. So like, there's definitely different standards, I guess. Yeah. And where I'm like, what do you mean? I just read this in high school. No, it was like 25 years ago.
Yeah. Doug thought the same thing. So did Silky. Yeah. Doug wanted to know if Silky had read the message about censorship. I have not. And neither has Silky, but she's putting it on her reading list. And Tea Coats. Oh, okay. Interesting. It's by Tea Coats. Okay. Good to know. Well, that is it for us today, guys. Thank you for everybody who stopped in and said hello, who commented in the chat. Hello to those of you who might be here and just lurking, and to those of you who watch the recording back later. We love having these talks, and we've loved being able to bring them to you guys.
Yep, and definitely keep it going in the comments even after this live, because the conversation keeps going.
Yep. And if you check the description box for this, you will find links to our playlist of all of these talks, as well as to some of the other things that we've mentioned. And I'll also include the names of all the books that we have mentioned and recommended. Silky read A Beautiful Struggle, which I'm assuming is on a similar thing. And happy weekend and happy Friday to everybody. That's right. I'm forgetting it's Friday.
Yeah.
So, and then, so that's it. I will end the stream, but Alex, if you and I stay on, we will be backstage. Sure. Good chat then. Bye, but everyone. Thank you guys, everybody. We'll see you next time. Bye. Long wave goodbye.